It was the reign of Kangxi Emperor, and barbarians from the west called Shilu threatened to invade China. 128 Shaolin monks rose from the Shaolin Monastery, the birthplace of Chan Buddhism and a place favored by the Qing emperors. They volunteered to serve the Qing emperor, took arms against the oncoming foes, and fended them off with their Shaolin Kung Fu. They declined any rewards and returned to their ascetic lifestyle. But no good deed goes unpunished. The Kangxi Emperor ordered his forces to storm the monastery and slaughter every last one of the Shaolin monks. The reason? A rumor? The cost? The lives of 123 monks. The 5 who survived pledged revenge against their Qing masters, restoring China to the lost glory of the Ming era. Restore the Ming, cut off the Qing, they said, and gave birth to the Tiandihui, or Heaven and Earth Society, that would occupy the shadowy crevices of the Chinese mainland. The Triads were born, or so the story goes. The reality, however, is a tad different. The Qing Dynasty was falling apart in its later years. Internal strife, corruption among the ranks, external threats and rebellions. Faced with invasions and impending doom, Chongzhen, Emperor of the Qing Dynasty, committed suicide. The Manchu people from the northeast settled in and formed the Qing Dynasty. These people were different from the majority of China's Han population and were seen as outsiders. As anti-Manchu sentiments persisted, people started to hang out in secrecy. In the southeastern Fujian province, sworn brotherhoods began gathering in the name of resistance and brotherhood. Families banded together in an oath of blood with a residing holy patron and rallied around a bodhisattva called Guanyin. Guanyin has various local manifestations across the regions, symbolizing mercy, compassion, and solidarity. Chinese folk religion and consequent ritualization quickly became a part of the underground societies. These traditions provided a spiritual anchor that centered each group and glued them together. Take the practice of fengxiang, rituals revolving around sacred incense division that the group would later use to identify its subdivisions. These groups were more concerned with mutual aid than political swagger, but the Qing authorities were quick to make them illegal. All it did was drive them underground, and so some of the groups, now out of the spotlight, started to arm themselves. Unsuccessful rebellions from these guilds began sprouting up at the turn of the century, and that inspired more confidence among the locals. During the Yongzheng era, the brotherhoods, while still underground, turned into more formal, organized, and official societies known as Hui, and started to communicate with each other. The societies held a unique mystique, were exclusive, and offered a power fantasy to anyone who would show commitment to their cause, so unsurprisingly, their recruitment numbers saw an uptick. One of these underground groups was the Tiandihui, known by many different names like the Hongmen, meaning floodgate, and the Heaven and Earth Society, which we directly trace to modern triad groups. The group formed when 4 men from Fujian, Tixi, Liamin, Zhu Dingyuan, and Tao Yuan traveled west to the Sichuan province to make a fortune. After some time in a cult whose monks were attacked by Qing forces, they returned to Fujian. Tixi went to the Guangdong province and organized a hui of 10 people. They drank a mixture of wine and incense ash, formed a blood covenant or Beishan Jimeng, and became brothers. Tixi planned a robbery of the storehouses, treasury, and homes in the Jiangpu county of Fujian's Zhangzhou prefecture to finally start a rebellion. The 10 men disbanded and started the recruiting process. Once they had enough numbers in 1767, they received information that there would be fewer guards on the county's western gate. They played their hand, but many of the recruits fled, and 33 were killed. By the next wave, Qing reinforcements arrived, arrested more than 300 participants, allegedly, and hanged several, including some of the core leadership. The Tiandihui went into hiding, and Tixi died in late 1779. But over the next decade, the guild kept expanding right under Qing noses. the grassroots movement grew into an extensive network across trade routes, tapped into local societies, made deals with bandit groups, and developed a following on the island of Taiwan. The members even developed a sign language to showcase their identity. When confronted by bandits, they would say, "Heaven moves as fast as a 3-uli cart. Muli Dushi will rule all under heaven, and obey heaven and join together in creating harmony." The Qing government was utterly clueless until 1786, when the mayor of Taiwan discovered the underground club and started to repress it. At the time, there was an immigrant from the Jiangzhou prefecture and a Tiandihui member in Taiwan called Lin Shuangwen, who started gathering Ming loyalists and local rebels to push back. The Lin Shuangwen rebellion in 1787 shook the entire region as the rebels took over Zhanghua, Fengshan, and Julu, leaving only the capital Tainan for the Qing. The Qing government retaliated with troops from 7 provinces and expended 1/3 of its entire treasury. They executed Lin Shuangwen and restored the status quo, or so they thought. The underground society was beaten but not defeated. While they recuperated, their bonds and sense of camaraderie strengthened. They introduced initiation ceremonies like passing under crossed swords and taking the surname Hong. These were in addition to the blood oath, of course. They also turned Guan Yu, a legendary military general from the Three Kingdoms era, into a patron god for Tiandihui households. Meanwhile, their ranks filled up as people looked to them as a source of protection, power, stability, and heroics, all needs that the established order could not fulfill. While the traditional institutions of the society became more sacred, its practical operations became looser as some sub-factions had completely different interests and priorities. It should be noted that while the Hongmen were fairly organized and united, they were far from a moral benchmark. Since the faction operated outside of the law, its members constantly engaged in illicit activities like murder and extortion. Local wings would often cover up their violent and duplicitous behavior to maintain their front. Another important distinction is that various groups and secret societies other than the Hongmen operated in China. These smaller rebel groups, secret societies, and guilds often had overlapping interests with Tiandihui, so they would cooperate and fraternize with the Brotherhood. In the early 19th century, the Hongmen made their way to Guangdong, the adjacent province with a high population and low resources. And since rice arrived there from the Guangxi province, it provided a nice platform for further expansion. Having tread in the shadows for more than a decade, some factions of the group were a little tense. They decided to forgo the subtle approach and taunt the Qing authorities head-on. Uprisings in Boluo, Gishan, and Yong'an counties cost the government around 2 million lives and 360,000 taels. A tael was a Chinese unit of weight, close to 1.3 ounces of silver. Through Guangdong, the Tiandihui infiltrated Guangxi, but that was not the last stop. By the mid-19th century, they had members in Hunan, Yunnan, and Guizhou provinces. These underground networks would go on to facilitate human trafficking and drug trade. In the latter half of the century, they made their way to the US, Canada, Australia, and other countries as Chinese immigration to these countries increased. Some people from the Tiandihui circles were also active in the piracy circles in the coastal regions of Guangdong, especially the opium trade. The Chinese government decided to curb the opium trade on moral grounds and mostly because of a major public health crisis. China had to fight 2 opium wars with European powers because of this decision. As a result, Britain, France, and other Western powers established spheres of influence in China, kicking off the unequal treaties era. At the same time, other underground clubs were popping up. One of these groups even instigated a full-blown rebellion known as the Taiping Rebellion. It began under the leadership of Hong Xiuquan from the Guangdong province. Coming from a poor family, he went to great lengths to participate in the civil service examination thrice, failing each time. Disappointed with the bureaucratic system and influenced by Christian teachings, He proclaimed himself to be the younger brother of Jesus Christ. He preached his doctrine in the Guangxi province and became the leader of the Dihui, or God Worshipper Society. As the group began expanding in 1850, Hong named his new dynasty the Taiping Tianguo, or Heavenly Kingdom of Great Peace. Consequently, his followers were called Taiping. After capturing Nanjing, they settled in and turned it into their capital. They received help from foreign militaries, but after years of fighting, the rebellion gradually petered out, culminating with the siege of Nanjing and the death of Hong Xiuquan. When all was said and done, the death count had reached around 20 million. The God Worshipper Society had received help from several groups, including a derivative of the Luojiao Buddhist sect from the Zhejiang province, the Green Gang. They played a crucial role in the Taiping Rebellion and disrupted grain shipments making their way across the Grand Canal. As the grain shipments were rerouted to marine passages, Shanghai became an important transshipment point. The city on the Chinese central coast was one of the treaty ports, where Westerners controlled commerce and foreign trade flourished. Chinese immigrants flowed into Shanghai, and so did the Green Gang. Since the Europeans actively sought it, the city quickly became a gateway for opium. It was, after all, the commodity they had gone to war for. Criminal factions were initially encouraged by foreign powers to establish networks and create supply chains to deliver goods to them. However, this did not work out as criminal groups like the Green Gang started stealing from the foreigners and selling it in the city. Opium dens were found all over the city. They also started protection racket schemes and set up centers for prostitution and gambling. Between prostitution and opium, Shanghai gained a reputation as the most decadent city in the world. When the weakened Qing government realized just how grim the situation was, it reactivated surveillance organizations known as Baojia to stay in the loop. By this point, the Heaven and Earth Society had a Guangdong wing known as Sanhehui, translated as the Three Unities Society. Some theorize that this is where the word triad comes from. Others claim that when the British arrived in Hong Kong, they noticed the value of the number 3 in the underworld's dealings, hence naming these groups triads. Today, the word triad is wrongly used as an umbrella term for various factions, all with different ethnic, political, and geographical backgrounds. And this was evident even as far back as the 19th century, when the Tiandihui became so big and diverse that it could hardly be considered a single organism. However, the vast black market networks and perks incentivized the group together out of mutual interests. Amid varying ideologies and conflicting stances, revivalist attempts were made to unite the whole group under one banner again: oppose the Qing and restore the Ming. With the loss of territory to European powers, the popularity of the Manchu-led Qing Dynasty was waning exponentially. As the years rolled on, dissent and civil strife became commonplace. A young revolutionary named Sun Yat-sen was witnessing the situation unfold from his exile in Hawaii. He founded the Xingzhonghui, or revived China Society, to restore Han supremacy and unite China. The followers swore to expel Tatar barbarians, referring to Manchu, revive Zhonghua or Huaxia, a united Chinese nation, and establish a unified government. The revived China Society absorbed the Fujian Literary Society and planned an uprising in the Guangdong province. However, leaked information led to arrests, and the leader once again went into exile. He continued his revolutionary activities abroad in South Africa, Singapore, and Japan. All of these places would later use the networks established by revolutionaries for illicit activities. The increased economic opportunities and the migration patterns of the Chinese further created environments conducive to triad activities in Hong Kong and Singapore. In the early days of the 20th century, Sun Yat-sen founded another secret society in Japan called Tongmenghui, which absorbed the revived China Society and Guangfuhui, or the Revive the Light Society, among other revolutionary groups. This amalgamation of secret societies would eventually be reorganized as the Kuomintang. The Kuomintang consistently leveraged the Heaven and Earth Society to move people, goods, and information. Not to mention those contacts made them privy to insider information, resources, and financial support for the revolution. The string of losses in the First Sino-Japanese War put even more strain on the Qing government, and the revolutionaries closed in. Sun Yat-sen overthrew the Qing Dynasty in the Xinhua Revolution in 1911. Now there was no unified front for the Tiandihui. The scheme had clearly run its course. With no enemy to bind them together, they stopped receiving financial support from local communities. Half of the society's wings came apart at the seams, and others turned to illegal means to make a living. The underground society started to foster debauchery, violence, and greedy ambitions. The ruling Kuomintang used their rebel contacts in secret societies to do its bidding, often as hired thugs. The biggest example of this is the Kuomintang's retaliation against the increasing influence of local communists in Shanghai. The party told the Green Gang to form a collective with other gangs in the region to oppose the Shanghai Labor Union. In the Shanghai Massacre of 1927, also known as the April 12th Purge, the Kuomintang, with help from the local gangs, killed around 10,000 civilians. The Green Gang also shared a percentage of its profits from human trafficking, prostitution, and opium sales with the Opium Suppression Bureau of the Kuomintang. But the gangs worked with anyone who could help maximize their profits. For instance, a lot of these underground groups helped the Japanese during their occupation in the Second Sino-Japanese War and the Allies in the Second World War. After the Second World War, when the communists wrestled control of mainland China from the Kuomintang nationalists, they cracked down on the underground elements. Most of these triads made their way into British Hong Kong. They divided up territories based on ethnicity, ideologies, markets, and geography. Groups like Woxing Wu, 14K, Sun Yian, and Wu Hop to exercise influence in Hong Kong and beyond. Involved in drug trafficking, organized killings, money laundering, arms trafficking, prostitution, extortion, counterfeiting, and illegal gambling, among other things, the three largest groups, Sun Yian, 14K, and Woxing Wu, also operate in Southeast Asia and have wings in France, Belgium, and the UK. As for the Hongmen, their members can still be found in mainland China, Taiwan, and overseas. Their successor in mainland China is the Zhigong Party, whose chairman, Jiang Zhojun, is the only non-communist party minister in the government. As for Taiwan, the Hongmen maintains a heavy influence due to its association with the Kuomintang leader and the Taiwanese father of the nation, Sun Yat-sen. The Taiwanese ruling party is often criticized for its connections to black gold, an umbrella term for suspicious underworld dealings and corruption. In 2019, Triad groups made headlines during the Hong Kong protests. As the locals protested against an extradition law that would have hampered the region's autonomy, hordes in white masks started attacking them. Experts around the world called it Beijing's attempt to use triad groups to further their agenda and suppress the locals. These headlines were a bleak reminder of the communities that lurk in the shadows, silently observing every move, only to pounce when it serves their interests. Unsurprisingly, their interests are quite malleable, adapting to the needs of the highest bidder. Thank you for watching. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about the Asian organized crime, consider subscribe to the channel for more videos in future.